institutional abuse of disabled peoples. And with us is the chair, Bruce Ind. I convinced Bruce that we should do less report writing and more interviews. And so this is an opportunity for us to share a story. I convinced Bruce that that was a good idea. So yeah, that's it. So this is our gift to you, is really our stories. The first question I've got is to Anna. So Anna, I often start by thinking about access. So Anna, I know churches, and I will head to steps and ramps. Do you want to? Have you noticed that? And what would you like to say to us about access?
Yes, so ramps are absolutely very important in terms of access. And of course, there are many other things to cater to different types of disability that are also important to access as well.
So give us some examples.
So I guess making sure things are able to be read easily, and
we know that our experience is churches will head to ramps and steps because that's sort of obvious, but then there's lots of other versions of whether it's written material or I know I've talked my experience about how someone found that rosters got in the way of people participating in worship, so actually access can be how we structure things.
Yeah, I guess it's when people have the energy to do things. So I guess for some people it might be a particular time of day, or they might have a string of things happening in the week, so that they need the weekend off, which I guess applies to everybody, but also particularly some disabilities types as well. Yeah.
So how do I work out what do I need to do to make access work? Like, how do I find out from Anna what Anna needs, or whoever it might be, about what's the things that we should be thinking about?
So absolutely talk to the person, ask what they need. There's some things you could think about beforehand. So, for example, if they've got a physical disability, you could think about the ramps, or are there steps, and does something need to be changed? But after doing that thinking, talk to the person and find out what they particularly want in that space.
Beautiful. Thanks, Anna. We're going to come back around, but I'm going to head now to Bruce. Bruce, I don't know if you were listening to Bart. Did you hear him at the start? He paused a bit about the word disability, and then he gave this sort of little caveat. And then I thought, well, I wonder what that's about, because I know I had a conversation with you, Bruce, about are you blind or sight impaired, or what's this language word thing that's going on here, and is it important?
Yeah. I think what Bart was saying is actually part of my experience. There's a certain vernacular, a certain vocabulary that is used even by people with a disability. It's remarkable. A number of times two blind people will part with the words of "we'll see you later."
Yeah.
It is just it's just part of the idiom. For me, I think language is really important because it can be excluding as well as including. I think it's really important that we remember that a person with a disability is a person first and is not described by their disability. The person is described with their disability, and as a consequence, they may need some different assistance to enable them to undertake the tasks that ordinarily might be accomplished quite successfully by most of us. From time to time, I need to say that I have to remind myself that I'm disabled because the experience that I have and the access to technologies that are available to me mean that that there are times when I'm not necessarily stopped. Well, I don't think I am, but other people might. But I am stopped by doing the sorts of things that I think Bart was talking about in his sermon.
So, Bruce, do you think everyone who's sight impaired has that same experience?
No. Certainly, and for me, it's tempered by the fact that I'm not black blind. I've got enough sight to get myself into trouble, and I can't compare myself.
Right.
I can't compare myself with people who don't have any sight,
Yeah.
and that So it's not sensible for me to speak on behalf of all blind people, and anything that I say and any actions that I undertake should not be conceived as being something that is typical of a blind person, a person who's blind.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. I'm going to come to Mark, and then I'll ask Bart. Is there anything that's stood out to you from these conversations thus far? So, Mark, like me, you're on the task group. What's important about what we're doing there, do you think?
Thanks, Peter. Certainly landing in the Synod office last year and taking responsibility with Bruce chairpersonship of the Disability Synod Task Group has been confronting as we've been waiting for Godot. We've been waiting for the Disability Royal Commission to come down, which came down in September. And in 12 days' time, by then we should have the government's responses to that. Governments, both federal and all state and territory governments, are being asked to respond about what are they going to do about it. And I think that the thing that we've done whilst we've been waiting is going, how do we prepare? How do we start to open up these conversations in our services and in our congregations, which actually mean that we might need to be doing some systemic things, not just individual responses, but systemic things around policy, around promoting the conversation, around listening to the lived experience. I'd far rather sit on the panel and say nothing and hear from people whose lived experience comes through. But we as a church need to look at how we respond.
Respond to those things. Thanks. So, Bart, has anything stood out to you thus far that you want to jump into?
The only thing I think I'd say at this point is just it's nice to hear some of the kaleidoscope of experiences, right? Like, I really like that metaphor, and that sometimes, if you have the old toy kaleidoscope that you twist around in some ways, sometimes the colors line up all very nicely and they make these beautiful flowery looking things, and other times you're twisting it and they're kind of, bumbling around in ways and not quite fitting in. And so again, we have ways that are normal, that people fit into, or patterns that we're accustomed to, that are maybe easy for most, and then for others, they don't fit into those patterns very well, or they're not accommodated by that particular way of doing things. And so that takes both some extra attentiveness to pay attention and to speak to someone, and to be able to adapt, which can be challenging if it's unfamiliar to us. But the attentiveness is first, and the adaptation comes second.
And what have you really learned from, if you think about your experiences, what have you learned as a parent?
Yeah. What time is it? So I think what I might add just a little bit to this, again, in terms of those patterns and normalcies, some versions or flavors or varieties, if you will, of the Christian church are extremely cognitive in their orientation. We're very word-focused. We're very hearing-focused. There's a lot of language, and there's a lot of theological terminology and things we just assume people understand. So for someone with a cognitive disability, and if behavioral or social disabilities go along with that as well, that person's needs and experience of worship is just very different. They're going to connect much more to the music or the symbols or the relationship and touch. And so how we consider, again, it's that, we think of all of those things as parts of worship, but we tend to normalize some of them. Like some of them come to the center, and we emphasize them and develop them and focus on them. And it's these things that sometimes drift to the margins that might actually be the central experience of worship for some people. And to be attentive to that and to ask someone and to be aware that God has provided with us with all of those resources, that we should pay attention to them and adapt them to various people's needs is important.
Yeah. Anna, Bruce, Bart has headed us into the conversation about what does this mean for congregations. So when you think about ministry, congregations, what would you say from your experience that we should pay attention to?
I guess firstly I'll touch on the accessibility point again, is making sure that buildings are accessible, and also for people with who might have sensory needs, that sometimes they'll bring their own ways to manage that they're comfortable with, and sometimes another place might have some things to help with that too. And just be aware of who's in your congregation, who might be coming to visit that morning, and what their needs are, and how to provide for that.
Thanks, Anna. Bruce?
I guess one of the things that I would like to say is that people with physical disabilities and sensory disabilities perhaps are less at risk than those with cognitive or behavioural disabilities. I wonder how a service that is attended by a neurodiverse person could be enhanced in order that they might deepen their relationship with the divine. Flashing lights and loud noises are excellent for some young people, but on the other hand, for some people who are coping with a range of neurodiverse stresses, they close off any opportunity to learn about and become more deep in their faith. I think what Anna said about knowing your audience is probably a pretty good thing. But the other thing is that some people with disability don't necessarily know how to talk and how to advocate for themselves, while others do. And it's important to listen to everybody and not take too much notice of the loud and clanging voice sometimes. I think my experience with the church is that the church does a pretty good job most of the time because they love the people that are part of their community and the people that they want to be at mission with. But in that love, they sometimes their enthusiasm runs ahead, and they don't necessarily look at the risks associated with the activities that might be participated in by people with disability.
Thank you. Last comments, Mark?
Being at Westbourne Park brings back a whole lot of stuff, really. I remember as a 14-year-old callow youth out of McGill, then, now Morialta, we joined with Westbourne Park youth groups over a Christmas camp. We'd be down at the ranch, and there'd be one-on-one care for people from Minda. and I know that that was more formative for me than probably I was helping the formation of the kids from Minda. It provided a great beachside activity. It certainly got the kids from Minda into a different space, but it really set up that thinking around what is ability, what is disability, and how do we actually contribute as people and Christians in this space. Philip said to me today...
So it's formational.
It's formational. You know, I was remembering my Auntie Audrey, who used to worship here, and Philip said, oh yes, you know, she actually overcame her disability as she got blind. And I'm thinking, I don't even remember her getting blind, because she was always Auntie Audrey.
Right.
And always, and it was her spirit that shone through, always. It was never what got in her way.
Amen.
Amen. Will you show your appreciation to the panel?